Valve is straight up lying to people about the new Steam Deck OLED right here, but you need to hear the truth. And the truth is, this thing is really, really good. Like, way better than what Valve is saying. I wasn't planning on buying the OLED Steam Deck, and to be honest with you, I didn't want to buy it. I already bought the LCD Steam Deck, and I used it basically every single day since I bought it. And if you told me in the past that Valve was going to come out with a mid-cycle refresh like Nintendo did with the Nintendo Switch OLED, and it was gonna be a better screen, I would have said, that's great, good for Valve, but I'm not going to buy it because the screen just isn't worth it for me personally to upgrade. But I am so happy to say that that isn't the case at all. Valve did upgrade the screen to this awesome OLED, but they also did so many more things. They upgraded every single thing that I personally cared about, except for one thing, which we'll talk about in a second, and they turned what already was my favorite gaming device with the LCD version into what I can honestly say is nearly the perfect handheld. I'm so used to companies like Sony or Microsoft coming out with their mid-cycle refreshes, and they're basically a minor update, if an update at all. But Valve, on the other hand, they worked really hard to make this a super compelling upgrade, and I gotta say, damn did they deliver. This thing is better in basically every way. So should you buy this? If you've been sitting on the fence about buying a regular LCD Steam Deck, but you haven't quite been sure and you haven't quite pulled the trigger, I would say 100% guarantee, yes, this is an amazing piece of tech. I bought and extensively used the LCD Steam Deck, and I also bought the ROG Ally, the Lenovo Legion Go, and a bunch of other handhelds, and I have to say, the Steam Deck OLED is my favorite of the group by a mile. But if you're someone like me who already owned the original LCD Steam Deck and you're just trying to decide if the OLED model would be a good upgrade or is worth it to upgrade, then that answer is a little bit more complicated, and we'll get into that in a little bit. The answer is maybe, but we have to talk about your use case to see if it would actually be valuable for you. But we'll get into that in a bit. I want to talk about the improvements, and yes, the screen obviously did get an improvement, but that's what everybody's talking about, and I honestly think while that is an amazing change and it's really cool, like I'm not gonna lie, it's a really cool upgrade, I want to talk about the biggest improvement for me, and that also just happens to be the thing that Valve is straight up lying about, and that is the battery life. On the LCD deck, the battery life was my biggest complaint. I even made a video over a year ago that was called something like my biggest complaint about the Steam Deck, and it was basically that I love the deck, but the battery life when you are playing demanding games is absolute shit.
And the worst flaw for me personally has been what I would call pretty terrible battery life when you're playing demanding games.
And I gotta say, it's been over a year since I made that video, and I still completely stand by what I said. If you're playing very demanding AAA games, the Steam Deck's battery life is terrible. In my testing that I did, running Elden Ring at a full 15-watt TDP, maxed out screen brightness, and an uncapped frame rate, which generally stays between 30 and 40 FPS, I got just over an hour of battery life. 1 hour and 11 minutes to be exact. Now, to be totally fair, this is a worst case scenario. You can improve the battery life pretty dramatically by lowering the brightness, locking the frame rate at 30, and maybe lowering the TDP if that's possible depending on the game. So this test is pretty much worst case scenario. But that being said, while this is worst case scenario, this is also how I like to use my Steam Deck. I like to play Elden Ring, and when you're playing a game like Elden Ring, you want the maximum FPS that you can, and max brightness also helps because I'm usually in a brighter room, so like, yeah, I want my brightness maxed out. So while you can lower a bunch of settings and get better battery life, that's not the way I want to use the deck. And little fun fact for you, I beat Elden Ring entirely on the LCD Steam Deck. So I'm not just talking out of my ass here. I know the use case because I lived the use case and I am that use case. So enter the Steam Deck OLED. Valve claims that you should get between 30 and 50% better battery life because of a physically larger battery, a more efficient screen, and a smaller nanometer SoC, which is 6 nanometer versus the old 7. And let me tell you, at least according to my testing, Valve is underselling the battery life in a huge way. And what's so crazy about this is like no companies undersell their battery life. They pretty much always oversell it, and then in real world conditions, you get worse battery life. But check this out. I did that same exact Elden Ring test with everything maxed out, and on the OLED Steam Deck, I got 2 hours and 27 minutes on a single charge. That's not a 30 to 50% improvement. That is over double the battery life. That's an absolutely insane improvement for a mid-cycle refresh. To get over double the battery life, I mean, that is crazy. And it's even better than that, because if you look at my FPS during the test, you can see that the OLED deck was getting between 10 and even 20% better performance the entire time. So it's like, not only are you getting over double the battery life, but you're also getting improved performance. So if you capped the FPS at like 30 or 40, then the OLED's lead over the LCD would be even more dramatic. And the improvements don't stop there. But before we talk about those other improvements, if you picked up a Steam Deck OLED or any piece of tech with a battery in it, then you're gonna wanna check out today's sponsor, UGREEN, and their new lineup of GAN Infinity chargers. This lineup is crazy thin, light, and powerful. It's almost hard to believe just how compact these chargers are, but here's some reference. This is the stock charger that the Steam Deck comes with, which can put out a maximum of 45 watts and only has a single output, basically one cable, which is stuck to the box, which is annoying, but whatever. This right here is UGREEN's 65 watt Nexode Pro GAN charger, which, as you can see, is actually smaller than the Deck's charger, can put out 20 watts more power, has a total of 3 ports instead of 1, and has foldable power prongs, which makes it even more compact, and it won't scratch stuff up if you toss it in your backpack. It's actually better in every single way. So not only can you charge your Steam Deck, but you can toss on your laptop and an external battery too, all at the same time, just for fun. This 65 watt charger also comes in a slim version, which is pretty similar, but it might work better if it needs to stay tucked up against a wall because there's a couch or a nightstand or something like that in the way, or if you're weird like me and you just like the way the slim version looks. And just look at how compact this thing is. It's actually smaller than a credit card, which is just nutty for this amount of power output. Both these 65 watt chargers can charge a MacBook Air 13-inch from 0 to 70% in 60 minutes. But if you're needing even more juice, then UGREEN's Nexode Pro GAN Infinity 100 watt or 160 watt have you covered. The 100 watt has 3 ports and the 160 watt version has 4 ports, 3 Type-Cs and a Type-A, and I gotta say, I love that UGREEN puts one Type-A on all of these chargers for all of our old devices that haven't caught up to Type-C yet. Both the 100 watt and 160 watt versions max out the MacBook Pro 14's charging speed, taking the MacBook's battery from 0 to 88% in just 60 minutes. And again, just for some reference, here's my MacBook Pro 140 watt charger, which only has a single port. And when you look at it next to UGREEN's 160 watt charger, UGREEN's is dramatically smaller while giving you 4 ports instead of 1. So yeah, UGREEN really stepped up the game here when it comes to charging your devices. I'll leave links below to all 4 of these new chargers, so feel free to check them out in the description, and thanks again to UGREEN for sponsoring this video. Alright, now we have to talk about the OLED Deck's other improvements because this thing is amazing. Valve says on their website that the OLED Deck runs cooler. If a company says something vague like that, like runs cooler, runs more efficiently, usually what that means is the difference is probably not noticeable, because if it was noticeable, they would put it into their marketing, because running cooler for something like a handheld is incredibly important. But no, Valve's marketing team just decided not to mention one of the most important features, and get this, are you ready for this? In that Elden Ring test, once I let everything settle in, the fan was running slightly slower on the OLED Steam Deck, but not that much slower, it's not that noticeable of a difference. But the temperatures, I was getting around 11 degrees cooler on average for the SoC on the OLED deck versus the LCD deck. If you're familiar with handhelds or laptops, 11 degrees cooler is an insane improvement. That's something where if HP or Lenovo or Dell or Apple or whoever it is, if they had an improvement like that where it was going to run 11 degrees cooler, I can 100% guarantee they are putting that in their marketing, and they're gonna have a whole page on it where it's gonna be like brand new thermal system, blah, 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 blah. I mean, they are going to go hard on that. But Valve just says, runs cooler. And you know how I said earlier that the fans are running at roughly the same speed? That is true, but the fans are different sizes. The OLED fan is actually quite a bit bigger than the LCD fan, and what that means is at the same or similar RPMs, the OLED fan is a much gentler, lower noise, more pleasing sound, at least to my ear. So when I have them set to the same RPM, which you can do with some software, I think the OLED deck sounds significantly quieter, and And it's not just quieter, it's like a lower pitch so that it's less annoying to your ears, or at least to mine personally. So what that means is the OLED deck not only gets better battery life, but it also has dramatically improved thermal performance while having quieter fans. And again, if this was a desktop, maybe you could say, who cares that much about quieter fans, it's a desktop. But this is a handheld. I guarantee you people who are using it as a handheld, they care about what the fans sound like, and they care if it's blowing hot air the whole time and heating up the whole thing and making your hands warm and making them sweaty, which by the way, this whole OLED Steam Deck runs cooler, so while the exhaust port does get hot and blows hot air, nothing else on the deck feels warm to the touch, which was not the case with the LCD deck. So again, for a PC nerd like me, for them to not put in their marketing this massively improved thermal design, it's kind of crazy to me. Like, that should be a huge selling point, like, on a handheld. Okay, but enough about thermals. It is time to finally talk about the screen. And I know everyone says it, but to be honest with you, the improvements that Valve made to the screen are amazing. And while I tried to capture it on film, it really doesn't show up as much on camera as it does in person. In person, this screen is a night and day difference versus the LCD. On camera, it looks better, but it just doesn't capture it as well as your eyes do. The screen is 12% bigger, and that's purely from a bezel reduction. The Steam Deck itself didn't change in size at all, so that's awesome. I mean, that's just free screen for no penalty.
This is free real estate.
It's also brighter at a peak of 1000 nits in HDR or 600 nits in SDR, and it also gets dimmer if you're someone like me who likes to play in the dark sometimes before bed. Terrible idea for your sleep, but I'm not judging you. It also has a higher refresh rate of 90 Hertz versus the old deck's 60 Hertz. And I don't think people talk about how big of an improvement 90 Hertz over 60 Hertz is. It really does make the screen feel dramatically smoother in the games where you can get that full 90 Hertz. It also is more color accurate, and usually when people say, oh, the screen's more color accurate, I don't care at all. I don't care about color accuracy, but I mean, look at these two screens side by side. Look at this red. When you see the red on the LCD, you think, yeah, that's a screen. It looks like red. Great, who cares? But then when you see what it looks like next to the OLED, you realize, oh, that LCD red wasn't red at all, and this is what red truly is. And yeah, that's overly dramatic, and I'm being kind of ridiculous here, but it is how it feels. This screen just looks so damn good that it's hard to look at the LCD deck anymore. It also has HDR, it has lower input lag as tested by Digital Foundry. The touchscreen is way better and faster, and it means if you have to use the on-screen keyboard, which I do pretty regularly, then it's actually usable and it feels like your average tablet or smartphone, whereas the old one felt clunky and not that usable. It also has the newer Bluetooth 5.3 versus Bluetooth 5.0, and that means that you can now use a Bluetooth controller like an Xbox or a PlayStation controller to wake up your Steam Deck. So if you just want to leave it plugged into the TV and then grab your controller and sit on the couch, you can wake it up, and that's something that you couldn't do on the LCD deck. It also has faster and more reliable Wi-Fi 6E, which is awesome for anyone that plays games via Wi-Fi, which I think is probably almost everyone who's using a Steam Deck, unless you're using a dongle with an Ethernet cable, which I'm not judging you on that. I do that actually kind of regularly because my internet kind of sucks. And it's about 5% lighter, and that might not sound like very much, and to be fair, it isn't very much, but it's enough so that every time I pick up a Steam Deck, and I have the LCD deck and the OLED both sitting around my office, as soon as I pick it up, I can immediately tell which deck it is purely by the weight. So it is noticeable. The buttons feel better and more clicky, especially the Steam button. The speakers are louder and clear, and I'm gonna be honest with you, the LCD Steam Deck speakers were fantastic, and I basically never maxed them out, but these ones are even better, so woohoo. The touchpads are also more responsive, which is awesome if you play games where you want touchpads, especially in games like Civ. Oh, having the touchpads, chef's kiss. And they ship the deck with a longer 2.5 meter power cable, which just means when you do have to plug into the wall, which you have to do less with the OLED Steam Deck because it's got better battery life, you can stay a little farther away from the wall. It's a little thing, but all of these little things add up to make a dramatically better package overall. So yeah, if I'm gonna be perfectly honest with you, I'm gonna say Valve's engineering team knocked it out of the park. This is a fantastic device, 10 out of 10, I love it. But their marketing team, you should have gone a little, I mean, they should have sold it a little bit more. I felt like when I looked at the marketing for this, I was like, oh, cool, it's a mid-cycle refresh, it's gonna be improvement, but not that big of an improvement. But then when I got it in my hands, I was like, holy shit, this is actually a serious improvement, and people need to know about it, but if you go on Valve's website to look up the differences, they barely have them listed. I mean, if you wanna look into the tech specs, you can see it, but this should be front and center that they have some serious improvements. Okay, and I said I was going to get to it. If you already have an LCD Steam Deck, should you upgrade to this? this? Well, I would say probably not, even though I know I'm breaking what I'm saying because I did upgrade to this, even though I had an LCD deck. But I would say there is a person that should upgrade from the LCD to the OLED, and that person is this. If you're someone who is regularly running out of battery life and you don't want to use an external battery to extend that battery life, I would say for that person, yeah, this is going to get you about double, at least in my testing, about double the battery life, and that is a very significant improvement. So I would say, yeah, if you really care about battery life, then you can upgrade from the LCD. And it's sad because it's like the screen is so much better, but it's hard to sell a better screen as a reason why you really need to upgrade. It looks phenomenal, and I'm glad that I did, but it's definitely not necessary. Battery life, on the other hand, is a real reason why you should upgrade. So that's just my opinion. Let me know if you think I'm wrong in the comment section below. Maybe people do think the screen is a good reason to upgrade, and maybe it is. But yeah, long story long, the Steam Deck OLED is an incredible upgrade, and you should buy one if you don't already have an LCD Steam Deck. And if you do have an LCD Steam Deck, you can still buy one. I mean, if it's your birthday or if it's Christmas and you've got the money laying around, you know, I'm not gonna say it's a bad idea. All right, that's gonna do it for this video. Hats off to Valve for their massive update, and they're just calling it a mid-cycle refresh, and it is, but it's better than that. It really is better than that. Okay, I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.